Hello. In today's class, as a part of industrial wastewater treatment, basic information on industrial wastewater treatment is divided into two types. One is dry process industry, wet process industry. Practically, all the volume of water used is calculated as the volume of the effluent. In addition to the process water, large volume of cooling water are also discharged as a waste. These effluent contain wider variety of materials of both organic and inorganic nature, including toxic substances. Difference between domestic and industrial wastewater. Domestic wastewater, as you know, is originating from bathroom, water closets, sink, wash basin, etc. of residential, commercial, or institutional building. That is, the characteristics are not going to vary much since all the water generally in the bathroom are similar in characteristics. So the treatment, if domestic water is treated, then the process remains same since there is no variation in the characteristics. But if you're going to mix industrial wastewater in with domestic wastewater, then characteristics is going to vary. In industrial wastewater, the characteristics of wastewater is depending on type of industry. For example, in food processing industry, the water is used for washing of foods and vegetable during processing, etc. Some amount of water will be by washing of floor, equipment, utensils, etc. So the wastewater is contained only BOD and some amount of oil and grease by washing of floors and equipment, etc. So in that part, the characteristics contain only BOD. If we consider the pharmaceutical industry, the characteristics is going to vary depending on type of the pharmaceutical product is going to come out, like tablet, medicine, and other things. There, the chemicals they are going to use will come out as a waste after the processing. Similarly, if you go for iron and steel industry, the wastewater entirely characteristics is changes by washing of ore and other parts. There, we expect more amount of inorganic substance compared to organic materials. So, the characteristics of wastewater depending on type of industries. The quality of industrial wastewater is also sometimes contain some of the toxic characteristics. If you go for combined treatment of this domestic and industrial wastewater, the treatment process is going to be entirely changes. That's why while combining domestic and industrial wastewater, we have to go for characterization since the characteristics of the waste will vary from industry to industry and also vary from process to process even in the same industry. The industrial wastewater cannot always be treated easily by normal method of treating like domestic wastewater because it is going to have specific characteristics in terms of color, BOD, presence of chemicals, presence of toxic chemicals, inorganic substance, etc. Whereas in domestic, we directly go for biological treatment since there is a less amount of inorganic substance. But the industrial wastewater had to go for physical, chemical, or biological process of treatment. But it directly should not be disposed into the water bodies since the presence of chemicals and toxic substance presence in the wastewater is going to affect the water bodies. In some case, it is going to affect microbial activities. That's why when we are going to discharge industrial wastewater into water bodies or you're going to combine with domestic wastewater, you have to be careful before discharging. It has to be treated and its effluent characteristics should be permissible to standards before discharging it. Some case domestic water, wastewater, when the BOD presence is less, directly we can able to discharge into water bodies, whereas industrial wastewater should not be discharged into water bodies or on land before treatment. Generally, if you're going to discharge industrial wastewater on streams, like for example, food processing industry, first step DO is going to be depleted since it having more amount of BOD. When BOD is small, first step DO is going to be depleted. Second, if we go anaerobic conditions, then it is going to be produce of hydrogen sulfide and ammonia and other end products. If wastewater contain toxic substance, it is going to affect aquatic life. If you consider leather industries or textile industry, the characteristic is entirely different. In leather industry, you're going to observe more amount of color in textile industry. Whereas in leather industry, it is of high amount of BOD in terms of thousands. If we discharge this water into the stream, the BOD is get depleted. In the sense, BOD is going to deplete DO level in the water bodies. When this wastewater discharge into the sewer line, some cases it is going to choke the sewer, also reduce the cross section. The industrial wastewater discharged into the stream generally containing of excess of inorganic salts, acids and alkalis, organic matters in terms of BOD, to specific to some of these sugar industries maybe or in food processing industry, suspended solids maybe in paper industries, heated water if it originating from the cooling towers, color and toxic substance from textile industries, microorganism from nuclear power plants you may get radioactive materials and Some case you're going to have a foam producing matter, floating solids and liquids. So these are some of the characteristics of industrial water in excess. In excess in nature. If you're not going to treat these characteristics, these parameters, the water body is going to be affected. Or if you go for combining system also with the domestic waste, it is going to be affected. That's why before combining industrial wastewater with domestic wastewater to reduce the treatment cost, you have to minimize all the characteristics of industrial wastewater. So these are some of the basic information regarding industrial wastewater, where you are going to consider is going to mix with domestic wastewater. As I mentioned earlier, domestic wastewater directly it can go for biological treatment, also in secondary treatment, whereas industrial wastewater you have to start from preliminary, primary, biological treatment before disposal. Since, as I mentioned earlier, it's going to have different characteristics. Okay, we'll discuss some of the MCQs, like what is called the pollution that can be traced directly to the industrial activity is generally the pollutants is coming from industries is industrial pollution. Which of the following is the largest contributors of to global pollution? Means in terms of CO2 is from industries is a major contributions. Which of the following pollution majorly responsible for pollution in the United States? It is a industrial pollution. It is a major. You might have heard like smog in Britain and in Los Angeles tragedies you already studied in environmental studies. The smog is due to industrial pollutant. It is smoke plus fog. Which of the following which of the following is the consequence of industrial pollution? Is nothing but ultimately it will go for global warming. Okay, how do industrial pollution result in the water pollution? Like dumping of various waste products from the industries. So that's why when industrial pollution in terms of its sources, like in water, you have to treat before you are going to dispose into the water, or you are going to combine with domestic wastewater. We have to treat to the permissible limit, then we have to treat the above process. Thank you.